Good afternoon. Very energetic. I appreciate that. Welcome back to it's Lunch with Books. Yes. Thank you, Carl. I have brain fog and I have a cold and all that stuff. So jet lag. Good afternoon. Did I say that already? Yes. If you wouldn't mind turning off your cell phones at this point, please. Please come to order, class. This Thursday at 7 p.m., again via Zoom, because what I found out when booking a marine biology program is that not a lot of marine biologists live in driving distance of Wheeling. I don't know why. But I'm having to Zoom them in from the coasts. But they're very good, if it's any consolation. Some of the best. This week's topic is marine mammals. So these are animals like whales and dolphins that, believe it or not, were land animals and then eventually evolved to return to the ocean. So they have legs and arms, bones, and things like that. Fascinating. Dr. Nicholas Tucker will be the instructor. That's at 7 p.m. And then next Tuesday is a very good day. We call it St. Patrick's Day. It's the actual day, March 17th, here at Lunch with Books. And we'll bring back the official house band of Lunch with Books, Fair May, and they will play the Irish and the Celtic music for you. And we'll have some other surprises and lots of fun stuff. That'll be next Tuesday, 1 week from today at noon. So as I started to mention, the Wheeling Poetry Series is the subtitle of this Lunch with Books. And as usual, the program is organized and curated, I like to say curated because it sounds more important, by the West Virginia Poet Laureate, our friend, whom I'm introducing now, Mark Harshman. Come on up.
Jim, this doesn't happen all the time. I don't know. Maybe there was liquor beforehand, Mick. I don't know. So let me just say quick word about the series. Besides thanking you all for coming out, that's terrific. The next reading in the Wheeling Poetry Series will be on Tuesday, July 21st, here at noon, as per usual, featuring Zaina Azam, who you may recall had to cancel last year due to an injury, but I'm very excited to bring her here. She is a mid-career poet of Palestinian American extraction, and her poems are important poems and good poems that need to be heard, and so I hope you will put that date on your calendar. Zaina Azam on July 21. Well, I don't know why it's taken me so long, Jim, to get you here, but I'm sure glad to have you. Jim Daniels is the recipient of the 2025-26 Michigan Author Award for Lifetime Achievement from the Library of Michigan and the Michigan Center for the Book. His new book, Late Invocation for Magic, New and Selected Poems, was just published, I'm guessing it's one of these here. Yes, right here. It's just been published. He has authored over 30 collections of poetry, 7 collections of fiction, 4 screenplays, and 1 collection of essays, Ignorance of Trees, which was published in 2025 and named a Michigan Notable Book. He's the recipient of 2 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships. As I recall, you can only win 3 in a lifetime, and 2 from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. Other writing awards include the Brittingham Prize, the Blue Lynx Prize, which pleases me very much, I know that one, the Tilly Olson Creative Writing Award, and many others. U.S. Poet Laureates Billy Collins, Ted Kooser, and Tracy K. Smith have all showcased his writing as part of their work to bring poetry to average Americans. During his long career, he has warmed up. Isn't that a great thing to do? Warmed up for singer-songwriter Lucinda Williams at the Three Rivers Arts Festival, read poems at the Jamestown Jammers AA baseball game, had his poem Factory Love displayed on a race car, and sent poetry into space as part of the Moon Arts Project. I say to hell with the Pulitzer. Who would want anything more than those achievements? A native of Detroit, he lives in Pittsburgh, where he's professor emeritus of English at Carnegie Mellon University. He also teaches at the Alma College Low Residency MFA program. I really didn't need to read all this, except that it does underscore what an amazing talent we have here with us today. And I did cut more than I would have liked. I know few poets writing in America today who are more respected for both their poetry and for their work on behalf of poetry. And he is an American poet with poems that here in this industrial valley of our own northern West Virginia have truths we easily recognize. His poem in your booklet called American Cheese begins, "At department parties I eat cheeses my parents never heard of. Gooey, pale cheeses, speaking garbled tongues. I have acquired a taste, yes, and that's okay, I tell myself. I grew up in a house shaded by factory clank and clamor, a house built like a square of 64 American singles, the ones my mother made lunches with, for the hungry man who disappeared into that factory and 5 hungry kids. American singles, yellow mustard, day-old Wonder Bread, not even Swiss with its mysterious holes." These are poems for our people, are they not? Or think of this opening for a poem. I'm just going to read you the first stanza, but it gives you a sense of how, if you pick up these volumes to read, you're going to want to read it cover to cover the way you would a fast-paced mystery. Exterior with quiet from his volume Birthmarks. The house of my birth has floated away into the Detroit River, like most of the East Side. I wish I could imagine it's landed safely in Canada to start a new life. But years ago, my aunt watched it burn to the ground. Please, a warm welcome for Jim Daniels.
Thank you. Is this okay? I want to make sure we're okay. Can everyone hear me in the back? I just wanted to make I think I do. I just need it. Is this better? Okay. Thanks, Mark, and thank you all for coming. I'm excited to be reading to you today. And I thought I would maybe start with a couple of the poems that are in the booklet, besides American Cheese, because they kind of represent some of the themes that I write about, particularly in the late invocation for magic. So, and you can read along if you want. The first one is American Dream. And so, as Mark said, I come from Detroit, family of auto workers, and this deals with that background. There's this famous Henry Ford Museum and Greenfield Village outside Detroit that every school has a field trip to. And my father worked for Ford Motor Company, and I worked there to pay my way through college, the same factory my dad worked at. And so we took my wife and kids there, and the epigraph for this explains the context. There was a robotics exhibit there where you could pretend to be on an assembly line. Some of the jobs these machines replaced were difficult, boring, or dangerous. Others were good jobs that paid well and workers enjoyed. My father, my children, my wife, and I were recruited to work on a toy car assembly line. My son placed the yellow plastic frame onto the conveyor. My wife snapped the red body onto the frame. My father snapped the blue seats in. I pushed the front end on. My daughter cranked the conveyor, controlling the speed. We each had a small box of parts. The museum employee in her perky red vest started a Chaplin-esque soundtrack, and we began working smoothly till she instructed my daughter to crank faster, and we got backed up tossing half-formed cars to the side. Faster, she kept telling her. We ran out of parts just as the music stopped. The employee counted good cars and bad. Bad outnumbered good. My son asked if we could keep the cars. She said no. In fact, we had to take them apart so that others could put them together again. My father and I had worked on assembly lines where if you couldn't keep up, you were fired. Where time controllers assessed how long each job should take and set the line speed. The family that took our places asked me to videotape the whole thing. I wish I could say I was making this up. Inside, I felt the old humiliation throbbing again in my stooped back. I told this woman bossing my daughter around I wanted to see my union rep. As a kind of joke, but not. But she had a script to stick to and was probably making minimum wage herself. She didn't explain to us what we were supposed to take away from our experience, just not the cars. And I should mention that at one point, the title of this book was American Dream for a long time, and then the marketing department weighed in and said, you can't title your book American Dream because if somebody Googles it, they'll never find your little book of poetry, Jimmy. And because American Dream, there's a lot of hits. I put a slash between American and a Dream, but they said, no, that won't do it. So it's Late Invocation for Magic. Now, the other poem here on this page is talking about the day, and it's for my kids. And that's another thing that, I mean, obviously they're grown, but I've written a lot about them over the years, and they've been nice enough to allow me to do that. And one of the big pleasures, for those of you who've had children or grandchildren, for me it was reading them books at night. And I still really miss reading those books aloud to them. Talking about the day. Each night after reading 3 books to my 2 children, we each picked one, to unwind them into dreamland, I'd turn off the light and sit between their beds in the wide junk shop rocker I'd reupholstered blue, still feeling the close reading warmth of their bodies beside me, and ask them to talk about the day. We did this, we did that, sometimes leading somewhere, sometimes not, but always ending up at the happy ending of now, in still darkness, listening to their breath slow and ease into sleep's regular rhythm. Grown now, you might have guessed, the past tense solid, unyielding against the dropped bombs of recent years. But how it calmed us then, rewinding the gentle loop and in the trusting darkness, pressing play. So maybe I'll back up a little and read poems about, well, I don't know how it was for those of you who have had children, but the teenage years were kind of interesting. And so were mine when I was a kid. So, a lot of things are changing, you're trying things out. This is a loose villanelle, if that means anything to any of you, but that's a poetic form that involves a lot of repetition. And it's called Private Room. My daughter was really sick, mysteriously sick and dangerously sick at the beginning of 9th grade. So she was going through adolescence, and basically, and one of the things that caused the problem was she was embarrassed about being so sick. And so she was trying to hide it. And then she ended up in the hospital. They couldn't figure out what's wrong with her. So this is called Private Room. My daughter got sick and nearly died, fall of 9th grade. She combed her hair out. I kissed her goodbye and goodnight each time I left, and she had no choice, attached to grim tubes, prone, ashen. My daughter sick and nearly dying of embarrassment as doctors probed the mystery and fought among themselves. I missed her goodbyes and good nights. We watched an old movie from childhood, no game shows or reality. 14, my daughter. Sick with worry she would die, I slept on the floor and wept. I pressed ice packs against her to stop tremors, then kissed her since I could. Good night seemed insufficient. So did I. No curfew in that moonless room without boys. My daughter got sick. Death passed her by. I snuck her home. We did not kiss. Good night. And this next poem is about my son leaving home at 18 to do, he volunteered for this program called City Year. And it's also about kind of overcoming that awkwardness of him wanting to be on his own, but also still being our child, at least on this particular hot night. It's called Heat of Departure. 90 degrees of thick, rude heat, a summer guest we can't get rid of, hovering over our city, our brick house. Yet our son who's leaving home tomorrow, we wish would stay. No AC in his room, but a window unit in ours for wicked waves like this. He's almost 18, can't sleep, he says, and though we've offered before, now he quickly slips his mattress on the floor in our room and plops down, 6'5". His own room wrecked with packing. His last 3 nights, a man sprawled back into a boy before us. The heat, we all kept saying, it's awful. In the morning, I rise early and turn off the AC just to hear him breathing. And so, let me introduce you to my parents in this little poem, which is really about the absence of my father. He worked for Ford's during the glory days of the auto industry, and so another poem in this collection is called My Father Worked 800 Hours of Overtime on the line at Ford's the year I turned 16. So, it was during the boom, and he was at work all the time, which is also kind of the subject of this, but part of it involves my mother dealing with his absence. It's called Turning Down the Ars Poetica, Heating Up the Leftovers. Somewhere a man arrives home from work in streetlight darkness, car door etching itself on the street's silence. Inside, leftovers on the stove. A woman in her robe prepares his plate. 5 children asleep, radio tuned to talk on health and home improvement and religion, though it's just soft static now, as she sits down to watch him eat, as he sits down to hear what he missed. I can't tell you whether they even hug or kiss before collapsing into bed together, for I am already in dream's tender arms. And if this violates point of view or logic, she'll get you a plate and explain it to you, my mother. So, and I'm going to read a poem about, so my grandmother moved in with us, with the 5 kids. She shared a room with my sister, if you can imagine that. But she was a nurse, and once my grandmother moved in with us, my mother was able to work 1 day a week. And this is called Nursing the Wounds. My mother walked to work in her nurse's uniform, white cap proudly pinned over her bouffant. down a dirt path through the field behind Arco, Tool, and Die, a narrow strip of weeds someone forgot to develop between 8 Mile and the cinder block wall where our subdivision began. The only nurse any of us knew in the foaming sea of housewives calling to their schools of gritty kids hiding in those weeds. The only ones who wore hats anywhere near that odd were the troop of nuns at the convent across from the Dairy Queen, shrunk into their black habits that hid everything. My mother's hat, a giant bleached butterfly twisted and starched into place. If you were to see her striding down 8 Mile Road in white everything toward the clinic next to Stan's party store, you might have paused at the mirage emerging through the green sprawl with the confident pace of a woman getting a paycheck, leaving 5 kids behind to be watched by her mother. Oh, she didn't make much, I know now. Like I know now that the hoots and whistles from passing cars were not due to her angelic aura. My mother, with her own stethoscope tucked into a straw purse like a diamond necklace, not a blessed rosary, though she had 1 or 2 of those. Her laugh cut with cigarettes and kindness and beer. What happened at work we never knew. All she had for us were Band-Aids in her pockets and dum-dum suckers they gave to kids who did not cry. Once riding my bike to Stan's after delivering my newspapers, I saw her heading to work at the clinic that needed no proper name, to cover for a nurse out getting divorced, I learned later. I saw her skip over the imbalanced sidewalk in front of Steve's service station, where I'd later learn how to pump gas and fix a flat. She did a little move in the air that involved hips and hands and some ecstatic recreation of something no nun was allowed to recreate. I may have flushed or pedaled harder to make the turn onto Topher Street past a trailer park so she would not see me seeing her, skipping over the unseen past, the abuse she never spoke of. Memory, that unreliable friend that whispered her troubles to the wind, nearly unpinning the shelter of that cap, despite a lifetime of hearing hearts beat. All those deep breaths we took while she listened. And so sometimes I think about, particularly I live on the south side of Pittsburgh, which is a very diverse neighborhood economically, and sometimes there's a sense of kind of complaining about our lives, and this is a poem I kind of wrote to remind myself that I have it pretty good. So this poem is called Nevertheless. If it's a contest to see who has the worst life, none of us with computers or pianos will win. We line up to tell our versions, poignant, heroic tales of woe, hoping someone licks a gold star, sticks it to our forehead. Did you eat all your vegetables? I ate all my vegetables. Even canned peas, even mushy asparagus. None of us with vegetables would win. My cousin's ex-husband's grandmother once met a starving child in Africa. If the choice is kill yourself or write a poem, if you kill yourself to write a poem, if you write a poem about killing yourself but do not kill yourself, then don't kill yourself, okay? Play a game on your computer. Cheat so you win. Count your lucky stars. Me, I've got a box full of them, ready to be licked. The box as light as a feather, the feather that floats above all our grasping. So, see, some of you remember those stars. Yeah. And it was crazy, because if you picked up a box of them, it felt like nothing was in it. Okay, so I'm going to read so this is a poem that brings, I think, the two worlds that have sort of dominated my life together, because I taught for a long time at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and I also came from a neighborhood where just about everybody, worked in the auto plants, and I'm just okay. There we go. Sorry. And so this poem is called Mega Everything, and the epigraph, the quote at the beginning, I'll read it to you, then I'll tell you where it's from. Some of you may recognize it. Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses, evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. It's not Robert Frost, okay? So this is from a song called War Pigs by Black Sabbath. And the one thing that some of you may not know that shows up in the poem is that Ozzy Osbourne from Black Sabbath once famously bit the head off a bat on stage. Some of you remember that. Okay. It shows up later. Mega Everything. The kid with stringy blonde hair and torn Megadeth t-shirt plagiarized song lyrics in his poem. Black Sabbath, I said. In my tiny office, he idly kicked the metal desk, not meeting my eyes, but then he never did. And it shifts back to my childhood. Now, 1972, Michigan State Fairgrounds. Black Sabbath ripped through the sharp muffle of Paranoid on the distant stage while I guzzled malt liquor from quart bottles on a gloomy Saturday afternoon. Ozzy stalking on stage scared me in a familiar Detroit way, like a biker gang crashing a high school party. I shook it off. I raised my fist. He said turning in the lyrics was a test but would go no further. Had I passed? Those lyrics, the only semi-coherent thing he'd turned in all term. He could have fooled me with Megadeth lyrics. Perhaps he had. We agreed that he should drop the class. He hesitated at the door like there might be one more thing. 16, my ears buzzed with Dark Star feedback, barking dogs, bloody teeth, fragments of a thorough ass-kicking. Ozzy's wire-cutter voice asked, what happened when we died and where exactly was the soul? When a thunderstorm arced down on us, no one fled. We stood and took it. Poetry was all I had that wasn't toxic. I should have been easier on the kid. His name was Chris. He slumped away, black boots clomping against the floor, and I never saw him again. The bitter mascara of the unrepentant and the flawed jewel of self-absorption. Ozzy hadn't yet bitten the head off a bat when I saw him in '72. He only had to do it once. The rest of us, Chris, we think about it every day under the black, incoherent moon. So, it was one of those things where initially I thought it was funny. I told somebody I taught with about it, oh, this kid plagiarized Black Sabbath lyrics. I was congratulating myself for recognizing it. But then I thought a little deeper about how at one point I was very similar to that kid. And so I wrote that poem. Okay, so how are we doing? Good? And maybe I'll read this next poem, which jumps forward a little bit, but kind of deals with something that ended up being problematic for me over the years. And it was always hard, it's still kind of hard to talk about, which was, but Ted Kooser, great American poet, former poet laureate, once he came to Pittsburgh and did a reading. He was an insurance company executive, and so he wasn't from the academic world. But so we took him out to dinner like they do, and people said, "Oh, do you want a glass of wine, Ted?" And he said, "No, I don't drink." He said, and this is the epigraph to the poem, "I quit drinking when it turned into a part-time job." And so he gave me that line that I use. I studied Spanish for years and years, but never learned to roll my R's. Like an engine not turning over, slowly wearing the battery down. This, after it took me 8 years of remedial speech to correct the slurring of my words. This, before I began to drink myself into slurring again. Though even drunk, I could not roll, could not flutter those beautiful syllables. My father never learned to say I love you or use a computer or GPS. I've wasted great quantities of unspare change considering what is willful and what cannot be helped and what cannot be blamed. Lift the hood and peer under as if something could be done. Sometimes you just have to slam it back down and walk away. I'm a pretty good walker, I've learned, wearing out shoes and blues on city sidewalks, rubbing shoulders against brick for luck. If I tell you I stopped drinking, that might suggest a certain redemption. But there's always that matter of the R's, circling like flocks of blackbirds in December that I can never name. And so Mark actually quoted a poem that references the proximity of Detroit to Canada. And so I'm going to read a poem that deals with that proximity. And so a lot of people do not know that there is a tunnel from Detroit, under the Detroit River to Canada. They know there's a bridge, but the tunnel is there. And so it has a certain mystique. You can go under the river or you can go over the scenic bridge, the Ambassador Bridge, which comes up in the epigraph, 2 epigraphs. First one explains the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel connects the cities of Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario, Canada. It is the second busiest crossing between the United States and Canada, the first being the Ambassador Bridge, which also connects the 2 cities which are situated on the Detroit River. And the other epigraph is, so, you hear these urban myths when you grow up, and I remembered this urban myth, and it occurred to me, is it really true? And, but this quote is the only reference to it that I could find online, so I still don't know if it's really true. But the quote is on this chat about Detroit. And somebody wrote, "I seem to recall a dumbass teen that stuck his head out of the car in the Windsor-Detroit tunnel and got decapitated on a pillar." See, and we always heard that growing up. Said, "Oh, don't stick your head out the window in the tunnel. You'll be like that kid." And we go from there, Tunnel to Canada. I looked forward to crossing the Ambassador Bridge, but ended up in the tunnel to Canada that has no grand name or view. An old girlfriend from out of state thought Tunnel to Canada was the name of a downtown restaurant. I emerged into the light to answer questions at the border after accidentally drifting into the frequent flyer lane. My life has been a series of gentle decapitations, and yet another curious head pops up again in suspicious wonder at survival. Out of the darkness into the light, and already angry men asking questions about me changing lanes. "Oh, Canada," I hum in my own anxious tunnel. They have been so nice to me in Canada, I want to end every sentence I write with Canada. I have burned many inelegant bridges, nothing like the bridges to Canada. I want to end every sentence with bridges. I misspelled inelegant so that it looks like intelligent. I have also burned many intelligent bridges with my stupidity matches, waterproof strike anywhere matches. I want to end every sentence with matches. Don't play with matches. I never lit a tennis match. I never played a match made in heaven. I want to end every sentence with heaven. I had a good meal at Tunnel to Canada. It's a nude restaurant, but the novelty's worn off. Clothes are back. The lights are back on. It's turning into a dark restaurant. The meal was all potato chips and poker chips, a special at the casino. It is hard to end many lines with casino, given that Windsor only has one. Finally, Detroit legalized casinos to compete with Windsor's casino. Though for many years I was a dumbass teen, I was never beheaded and continued as a dumbass into my 20s. They finally let me go through customs at the end of the tunnel without even searching me. Me, I am still searching. So, and I'm going to read a longer poem, which takes you back, because I really haven't touched on my neighborhood too much that I grew up in. It's basically this is about my education in my high school. It's called Outdoor Chef. Nobody believes my high school offered a class called Outdoor Chef. The yearbook carried a picture of us firing up the barbecue in the parking lot. This was before the invention of the gas grill, before they raised the drinking age back to 21 from 18. Jimi Hendrix burned his guitar at the Monterey Pop Festival, then died shortly after, bumming us out in Outdoor Chef. It was only a one-semester course, so we had to cram. We spelled our names on the sidewalk and lit them, like pissing in snow. Charcoal lighter was routinely abused. Our teacher was Mrs. Reynolds, enormous and cheerful, and in retrospect, willfully ignorant and alcoholic. It was a difficult class to teach, no textbook. Mr. Farwell, our principal, needed higher graduation rates, courses to shunt problem kids into. Not one fight in Outdoor Chef, despite having the toughest guys in the school bunched together around the grills. Class was often outside, even in winter. Class was often cut, long wild hair disappearing into snow toward the parking lot. Joints often snaked between us, smoke blending with burning meat. I learned a lot about cooking chicken and pork. See, those are important things. You can get sick not cooking them long enough and make others sick too. Neighbors would never come over for a cookout again. My apron had some crude joke about a hot dog on it. So did everyone else's. I can't begin to express how clever we were. We cooked a whole turkey for Thanksgiving and served it to Mr. Farwell and Mr. Stark, the assistant principal hitman. He said he could have used a course like that when he was in school. They did not get sick. It was a festive occasion until we let a live turkey loose in the main hallway. No girls in Outdoor Chef, though. You might have guessed that. The jocks were subdued and serious about remaining eligible. Our school had few jocks to spare. The rest of us were lighting each other's long hair on fire and thinking, that was a fine joke. Okay, Eddie Bucco did get stabbed with a skewer, but we all agreed it was an accident. We enjoyed waving our hands above the hot coals. None of us bothered with winter gloves. The last day of class, Jackie Smoker brought in his cheap electric guitar and tried to imitate Hendrix blasting from his nearby car radio. He messed up his hands bad, but for a while, it was beautiful. Even now, I am full of self-mockery and loathing. The truth was that for many of us, having our own barbecue would indicate a successful life. Mrs. Reynolds had gone to college to teach home ec. We should have treated her better, her and everybody else. Yes, it's on my transcript with a C. Our final had some math on it. The wind blew ash and smoke into the air, just like at the factory down the road. We had to provide our own briquettes. There's an enormous number of things you can cook outdoors. The only class in which we believed what the teacher taught us, because we could see, that in gym class. We chewed gum outside and threw it against the school building. Mr. Farwell gave most of us diplomas. I don't know how many years Outdoor Chef was offered. You could not burn your marshmallow on the test. That when all we wanted was to go up in flames. Thank you. Now, just a couple more here. And, okay, I'll read this one and then a shorter one. This is actually on the street a little bit with some of the same people from the school. But, so, our neighborhood went up around the factory so that there were a lot of kids around the same age on our streets. And a couple kids were old enough to go to Vietnam, and the rest of us were younger. And that's sort of the context for this poem, called Up on Blocks, which, as you know, you put your car up in blocks when you're working on it. His father, limping from his stroke, heaving his lunch pail into the back of his pickup truck like some stubborn, gimpy shot putter, then driving off to the job they gave him after his rehab, steering a high-low through the greasy plant after Danny died. One day, recovering on the porch, he hollered for the ice cream man to stop, then bought us all popsicles after Danny died because his son, Vietnam, and so he had a cough that could maul a lion, but he wouldn't stop smoking after Danny died. Danny left his car, an absurdly red Fury, up on blocks on our Park Street to work on when he got home, but he never did. So after Danny died, the car sat rusting. No one touched it for years till one night some asshole torched it. A whoosh heard down the block. And his father trembled and collapsed in the terrible light of the flames after Danny died. A tow truck dragged away the mess, gouging concrete into sparks as it pulled away, leaving charred cinder blocks like used-up Bibles. And we hauled them away to the weedy field behind Bronco Lanes where they may be lying still after Danny died. Oh, the shame of the unmarked grave somewhere off the end of our radio dials, while we fiddled with the blown fuses of our cheap electric hearts after Danny died. His father survived the second stroke with one arm twitching and returned to sit on that porch, drooling odd noises, flinging his good arm at flies. And I sat with him one afternoon for hours, then never again after Danny died because I was no saint and he was no prophet. And his pickup replaced the Fury as the vehicle going nowhere. And his wife bagged groceries at the A&P down the block and brought home what she could carry after Danny died. And we were fierce and serious boys who would never go to war and thus could always be fierce. And we too smoked cigarettes and swore and screwed and carried on like Danny did before he died. And I have not mentioned his stoic bride and a ramshackle wedding of a false pregnancy annulled shortly after, but he had already signed up. That's the way it was on our street, of the hard luck and the harder, before and after Danny died. And he planted a bottle of Boone's Farm on every table in the grade school cafeteria. And we squeezed onto the tiny benches and danced to Top 40 in front of the stage where the bridal party sat. And he guzzled from the bottle like the King of America in his frilly tuxedo shirt. And his father, Lord, his name was Bronco, gave the saddest toast I'd ever heard, then sat down and smiled the beatific smile of the damned and the oblivious. And I cannot remember it now, having drunk from the bottle myself at 15. Nobody fought, and he leapt hafty. And the bride and groom drove off in the Fury toward the welcoming cliff, and after Danny died, the war ended quickly, and the ice cream man got busted for selling drugs. We all stood at attention at Bronco's funeral, like soldiers who had lost their general, because he had once bought us popsicles because we would live forever. And no one burned the pickup, and his widow took to driving it. And one winter morning, I scraped her windows clear, and never again after Danny died. Because I had my own car, and it started and ran, and I put on as many miles as I could after Danny died. Thanks, and I'll end with this odd little short prose poem, but it's kind of, for me, it's like the intimacy I feel sometimes when I'm writing, like I'm talking to you. It's called Dusk. Okay, it's quiet here and we can talk. Here and now being relative things. A cracked cement slab of a porch, the blur between day and night. Quiet being a relative thing, given the chattering cicadas in the trees I can't see. Just leaves, barely swaying in light breeze, like I'm in some lazy nightclub after hours, the only one left, nowhere to go, or perhaps it's the one place I want to be. The light muted orange, the smell muted orange. Good light for dancing alone to percussion, or a lack of percussion. Even our own hearts smoothing into graceful, subtle waves without spikes or plunges. I said we can talk, which means we don't have to. We have to breathe, to not think about breathing. The imperative shrugs its head and closes its eyes, hovering solitude. I'm swimming toward, not away, water barely stirring through my cupped hands. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Questions for Jim?
If you do have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come to you with the mic. I know some of you have questions.
How long did it take you to write your book?
Well, because it's a new and selected poems, it kind of takes poems from like 9 different books. And there's like 20 new poems that I added, so it's new and selected. So I did earlier selected poems in 2003, so it was 20, so it represents like 22 years of writing.
Your poetry is beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you.
Here you go.
I have a question and a comment.
Okay.
A couple times you mentioned 8 Mile Road, and is that the same as Eminem referred? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So I grew up, so 8 Mile, Eminem's the rapper. He's also from Warren, which 8 Mile is the border between Detroit and Warren. And it's a very complicated area to grow up in, and there was a lot of class and racial tensions. And so that's one of the few things I have in common with Eminem. I lived actually closer to 8 Mile than Eminem did. He dropped out of Lincoln High School, which is one high school further away. But I recognized things about him. And an interesting connection is my mother was kind of a volunteer tutor for grade school kids in the area. And they filmed, if you ever seen the film 8 Mile, there was a trailer park in it. And that was in our neighborhood. And so there was this whole issue of whether the student she was mentoring was going to show up to meet with her the day they were doing the filming. And he didn't. He wanted to, I guess his mother let him see the movie. But yeah, so it was close, physically in that way.
The one comment I have is, and you had mentioned Ted Kooser, and I'm not sure if Mark might have something to do with this, but it was around 2010, and Ted Kooser came to Westerwood University, and he gave 3 talks. And I attended all 3, because after I attended the first one, I was like, well, this guy's the real deal. But in one of them, in the English department, there was a young man in the back, and this had some impact on me. And it was after he had read some poems, and if there was any questions, this one young man said, you know, I want to be a writer. And he said, and I love writing poetry, and should I get my PhD? And Ted Kooser said, well, I'm going to tell you something. I'll put up a stack of thank you notes against a PhD any day of the week. That has stuck with me ever since, and I make that part of my life, but I don't know if that young man got it, but I loved it. Anyway, just needed to share that.
Sure.
Okay. Hey, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks. Let me just tell you a quick Ted Kooser story, and some of you may even know this about him, because he famously would write a Valentine's Day poem every year and send it to whoever signed up for his list. He's kind of stopped doing it because, you know, Ted's pretty old. He's still writing, though, and he still shares his poems, actually on the internet, because at this point he doesn't care. He just sends them out, and he kind of publishes them. So if you want to read some Ted Kooser poems, he's on Facebook, but he's kind of has his peak number of friends, but he does post a lot on there. But that whole thing, that says a lot about him, that generosity of spirit and humanity, that he had his Valentine's Day list and they were good poems too. So thanks.
Well, thank you for being here, but I saw where you spoke about class, race, on your invocation about magic. Could you share with me your experience in Detroit at the time? Because I'm sure you were familiar with a lot of black neighborhoods. How far was that from you, or did you go to school or work with any people of color?
Oh, no, that's a good question and a complicated issue. Yeah. So I was born in Detroit, and we lived there for a while, but then my parents actually moved. They weren't part of the white flight, though that was a big thing in Detroit, because my father was working at the Ford Rouge plant, and then he got transferred to the Sterling axle plant, and he wanted to be closer to work, and so he moved us out there. And actually the homes in this little subdivision were cheaper. So during the Detroit uprising in 1967, I was 11 years old, and I've written about that because I was kind of oblivious at 11. But so Warren, where I lived, at one point was the largest, most segregated city in the country in terms of it being majority white population. Right across 8 Mile Road from Detroit, which was a predominantly black city. So you had that, there was a sense of a kind of border mentality. And the one place where we came together was actually in the car plants. And I just read an very interesting novel. It's called Crucible by the writer named John Sayles. And it's a historic novel set during the 30s and 40s in Detroit and about the union organizing. And he deals a lot with the fact that the plant, there was racism in the factories, but they were more integrated there than they were when they left to work. And there was a lot of tension there. So yeah, I've written, there's a poem in this book that is called Gun Shy. And it's a real long poem and sort of deals with that in terms of the separation and the things we had in common in terms of different kinds of exploitation versus the things that separated us too. So it's something I'm very aware of and have thought a lot about but growing up there, I wasn't really aware until the National Guard helicopters were flying overhead and what's going on. And my grandfather, who still lived in Detroit, calling us on the phone. And that was my first experience in terms of really becoming aware of race as an issue, obviously in the country, but in our community in particular, when it was so obviously divided.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
It's just funny. Did you ever get to go to Motown? You were there?
Oh, the Motown Museum is actually very small, and it's hard to get in, but they're expanding it now, because it was just a house where they recorded all that music out on West Grand Boulevard, and it's a real landmark, and there continues to be this interest in it, so finally they said, we're going to make it a little bigger and have more things and allow more access to it. I don't know where they are in the process, but I know they are expanding it.
One last question. Anybody?
My adopted son was a poet, and he passed away 13 years ago, and recently I moved back here, and I found all these poems in my home that I didn't know existed. And the emotion that you gave is, I've been writing them down and putting them together, but I came here to try to get inspired to do that, and you did that for me, so I want to say thank you. And
Well, thank you for your time.
Okay, one last question and we'll wrap up.
Have you ever written a poem about throwing octopus on the ice?
Oh,
As a Detroit Red Wing fan.
no, but some of you may not know about this great hockey tradition, but so Detroit's one of the original 6 hockey teams, right? And because it was so close to Canada, it's always been a huge sport and with a big following. But back in the day, you had to win 8 playoff games to win the Stanley Cup. Octopus have 8 tentacles. And there was a tradition of somebody sneaking an octopus into the arena and throwing it on the ice. It deserves a poem, but I haven't written that.
At Holy's Fish Market in the Strip District in Pittsburgh, they will not allow anyone to buy octopus with a Michigan license.
Now that's good, because they've tried to keep the octopus out, but there's no way. People sneak them in. All right, well, thank you all, and I'll be up here.
Jim does have a few copies of more recent books for sale here, so please.
And I have one final announcement. On April 7th, we are having a poetry slam here at the library for Lunch with Books. If you want to read a favorite poem, a poem you've written, please see Sean to sign up. Staff are participating. We need more participants, so please join